All I want to do is go the distance. It ain't over till it's over. You're gonna have to go through hell. Lumix. Worse than any nightmare you ever dream. Welcome everybody to the ultimate showdown. Lumix versus Sony. But when it's over, I know you'll be the one standing. You are weak.
The S1R Mark II is the latest and greatest from Lumix, and in my opinion, I think it is finally the hybrid camera that will take down Sony as the king of mirrorless cameras. I know what I just said. Now let me tell you why. 8K video up to 30 frames per second, 4K up to 120 frames per second with no crop, a new stabilization mode taking Lumix's already amazing industry-leading IBIS to even better heights, dual recording slots taking SD, CF Express Type B cards, and you can also record to an external SSD, of course. There's internal ProRes and ProRes RAW up to 5.9K, again, all internally. There's a new AI autofocusing system, a new super high resolution mode going up to 177 megapixels, a carbon fiber shutter curtain, pre-capture for photos up to 1.5 seconds before you fully press down the shutter button, 40 frames per second burst fire mode in photography, and so much more. And get this, this was my favorite part of the presentation from Lumix. All for less than Sony's leading flagship cameras, which offer anything similar. Let's get into this behemoth of a camera, the Lumix S1R Mark II. If any of the specs I have mentioned in this video do change or I have said the wrong thing, check the comments below and I'll put any updates in a pinned comment. The first thing to note is it now shoots 8K. This may be something that you can take and be super happy about, or it can be something that you can leave because you might not use it too much. I'm kind of in both camps. I'm not going to suddenly start shooting all of my YouTube videos in 8K, but I definitely see the appeal of it. Being able to film in 8K means you've got a lot more resolution to work with, meaning you can crop in and essentially create two angles out of one in a way, or if you do a lot of visual effects, well, having more data is always better. I probably won't be using it too much considering 8K files are pretty massive, and of course you chew through more battery that way, but it's still a very nice thing to have. Speaking of 4K though, we now finally have 4K 120 frames per second, no crop at all. How freaking sick is that? I've been okay using 4K 60 on my S5 Mark II, and you know, the slight crop can be a hindrance, it can be a tool. I tend to use it as a tool just to get more reach out of my lenses, but now not having to worry about having a crop on my shot whenever I want to shoot higher frame rates in 4K, it's just going to let me use my lenses as they are. If I want to get a wide angle shot as a slow motion, I can do that now, which essentially has been impossible to do with the S5 Mark II because no matter what, you have a crop. Unless, of course, I switch down to 1080p, which has really been what I've been doing. Next is the AI autofocus. I said in a recent video how I feel the only thing Lumix was behind on in terms of its autofocus performance compared to Sony is that Sony has these AI chips and AI autofocus systems that can easily recognize different subject matter and all of that, and it just was a little bit better. But now, now Lumix has that. Lumix's autofocus was already really good. Ever since they made the switch from contrast to phase detect autofocus, they've just been making it better and better incrementally, with firmware updates being released very consistently. And now it's at a point where honestly, I think it is almost as good as Sony's. I've worked with FX6s extensively for a lot of professional work, and yeah, the autofocus is killer. But I feel like Lumix's is honestly maybe only 1% behind. But now I'm very excited to see where it's at, especially compared to Sony's. Is it going to beat it, or is it at least going to be just as good? Okay, let's step aside for a second and cover some of the photography stuff, because after all, this is a hybrid camera, but we'll come back to the filmmaking stuff later on. The S1R Mark II has a very impressive 44 megapixel sensor and is capable of taking burst photos up to 40 frames per second with the electronic shutter. And it can take up to 10 frames per second using the mechanical shutter. Pairing that with the new autofocus capabilities, Lumix is saying that you'll basically just never miss a shot. And personally, I'm inclined to believe them considering my experience having used the S5 Mark II and the S9 alone. So something with new autofocus and even faster burst rates, damn. Adding on to the photography specs, we now have pre-capture up to 1.5 seconds before you fully depress the shutter button. Very, very cool. I've always appreciated pre-capture as a tool. Super cool for nature stuff, for sports stuff, event work as well. Something that is going to be so useful just in case you miss that moment. Ooh, weddings as well, actually. In case you missed the moment when you press the shutter button, you know you didn't actually miss the moment. So long as you're already pointing it there, you got it. There's also an improved high resolution mode on the S1R Mark II. On the S5 Mark II, you can do this up to 96 megapixels. And the way it works is basically the camera will take multiple photos, but for each photo, it will like shift the sensor around and then it stitches them together and boom, super high resolution photo. Well, the S1R Mark II can do this. Up to 177 megapixels. Now that's just like, what are you capturing? What are you capturing that you need this much detail from? No, but for real, if you're doing like big billboards or posters or something, or you just want to capture something in super high res, then being able to capture at that high a megapixel count, crazy. The super cool thing as well, just like the S5 Mark II, you can still do this handheld. You don't need a tripod to use the super high resolution mode because the IBIS is just that good. All right, let's come back to some video stuff because this is the really fun stuff that I love to focus on personally. And next up, and actually this does affect photographers too. I jumped the gun there, but it's the IBIS. The IBIS, they actually added something I'm so happy to see. Last year, they added a high strength mode to the electronic IBIS stabilization thingy, and it makes it so that it's even smoother. It's crazy. It's like having a gimbal in your camera. It is seriously crazy, but it came with a crop. This was kind of annoying because again, if you want to do a wide shot, you have a crop to deal with, or you just have to forego the additional stabilization. Not, that it mattered too much because the IBIS alone, even with the electronic stabilization turned off, is already very good. But having it on high, you just got the most buttery smooth shots. It's crazy. And now, I don't even know how. Lumix have made it so you have the high mode for the electronic stabilization turned on, but there's now no crop, or it's like super minimal. It's, when they announced this, I was shook. I'm so excited because now you can do wide angle shots with high stabilization turned on and no crop. I'm very excited to test this out for myself to see how well it performs compared to the like traditional high electronic stabilization mode. So I'll make a future video about that for sure, but great news. All right, now let's dive into the specs, the codecs, the resolution, all the good stuff. As I said, this camera can shoot 8K video. Very cool, it's been done before, but it hasn't been done before in Opengate. That's right. This camera will be able to shoot 8K Opengate in a future firmware update. Coming this year, it will be able to do it this year, but at launch, it can only do 6.4K Opengate. That's still super cool. 6.4K Opengate is a little bit higher resolution than what we can do with the S5 Mark II, but at least coming later this year, or by the time you're watching this, maybe it's already out, you can do 8K Opengate. We can also shoot 7.1K Opengate, so there is choice if you want to have a little bit less resolution. You don't need to do the full 8K to shoot in Opengate. I think this is such a cool thing that they've done because now this camera can basically keep up in more ways with the big boy cameras like the Reds and the Aries. And considering other cameras like Lumix's GH7 have the Arri Log C picture profile, which means you can kind of almost perfectly color match with an Arri camera, then being able to have this camera shoot in 8K in Opengate means it can keep up with the Red cameras that have super high resolutions, for example. Now at launch, this camera does not have Arri Log C, which is a bit of a shame, but I guess it depends. Different tools for different things, and maybe it will come in a firmware update. Things don't stop there, of course. As I said before, this camera can shoot in RAW internally. Specifically, it shoots Apple ProRes RAW up to 5.8K. This is insane because being able to film RAW internally without having to use an external recorder and record it over HDMI is just going to simplify your RAW recording setup. Instead, you can record everything onto a CF Express Type B card or onto an external SSD. The next thing I wanted to take note on, not a huge deal, but something I was excited about because as an S5 Mark II and S9 user, I don't have this screen. If you have the GH7, well, you do. And it's the full omnidirectional flippy, tilty, rotatey, everything direction kind of screen. The S5 Mark II flippy screen is really good, but this one is better, and I'm just excited to try it out. Now this camera can do a bunch of different codecs and a bunch of different frame rates, and it ranges from 1080p all the way to 8K like I said. There's also a variety of different all-intra or long GOP codecs for every single resolution, which is very exciting to see because I know some people weren't too happy about all the codecs on the S5 Mark II being long GOP because it's like a slightly lower quality version of video compared to all-intra. But yeah, you'll be happy to know, all intra, all available on all the resolutions of the S1R Mark II. That was kind of difficult to say, I'm not gonna lie. All right, now I know we've covered a lot, but believe it or not, we're not done. This camera has a host of integrations with other applications, and the third one is my absolute favorite, and I genuinely didn't see it coming from Lumix. First off, for my photography peeps, the S1R Mark II is the first Lumix camera to work seamlessly with Capture One, meaning you can tether it for studio work and it'll work perfectly. I don't have any experience of studio photography using this kind of setup with Capture One. I have used it to edit photos before, and it's a cool piece of software, so I'm sure that's really exciting for those of you who are into that. Next up for us filmmakers is we have the Frame.io integration that we've got on some of the other Lumix cameras as well. What this means basically is that as you're filming and you finish recording a clip here and there, it will automatically be uploaded to your Frame.io account where if you're, let's say, working with a crew and there's an editor remotely, they can access those clips and begin editing it as you're filming it, which is just the most coolest thing. Like, how useful is that? Someone is preparing the final edit while you're still filming it. That's so cool. The next integration, like I said, my favorite, number 3. When they said this on the presentation, like pre-presentation, I actually said holy shit, because what? Lumix are just killing it by releasing another app. This is Lumix Flow. Now there are 3 main aspects to this app, and the third one, again, is my favorite. The first is it allows you to use your phone as a monitor. Sony has had this for time, so it's nice that we can finally do this with our Lumix cameras, as you always have your phone on you, and frankly, it's probably a very good screen. So being able to use it as your monitor is just gonna be a huge time saver, and also it means you don't have to buy an additional monitor, you can just use the phone that you already have. You can of course change your camera settings as well through your phone, so it allows you to make the most of using a smartphone as a monitor. The second part of this app is you can use it as a standalone app with your phone. You can script, shoot, and edit everything on this app and basically be a filmmaker just by using your phone and this application. It's nice to see this little bit of extra effort put in to make it a bit more than just a monitor app, and well, we're not done there, are we? The third and favorite aspect is what they've called Lumix mode. This allows you to create storyboards in the app and then do on-site checks during the filmmaking process for things like framing and comparing your shots live to your storyboard. So you can see the frame you've drawn on your storyboard, and then connected to the camera, you can frame everything up to your storyboard that you're viewing on your phone. That's so smart. Then as you're shooting, you can organize your data so you can mark which clips are good and which ones aren't, so that later on when you're editing, there is that metadata saying this is the clip to use, and you don't have to then sift through tons of clips to find which one was the good one again. You just have that marker there already. The best way to create a great video is to have excellent pre-production, utilize tools to help the filmmaking process, and then make the editing process as streamlined as possible. And it seems like Lumix Flow is definitely helping you to achieve those things. Okay, now for the most important thing. I bet you have been screaming at me from the beginning of the video, and you're just wanting me to get to the point now instead of dragging it out, and the price. This is for me where it's official that Lumix beats Sony. Because for this price, Lumix is clearly beating Sony on features. The Lumix S1R Mark II will be available from March of 2025 for £2,999. When you look at cameras of similar spec from Sony, cameras like the FX3, the A7S III, or the A1 Mark II, those cameras cost £3,840, £3,399, and £6,298 and 80 pence, respectively. Across those Sony cameras, you get the amazing things like the AI autofocus, the 8K, the high 4K frame rates, but at the price point you're paying for those features across multiple cameras, you get them in one camera for so much less. It sounds like a knockout to me.
You are weak. It's your time. You are bigger. No matter. You will fall all the same. Oh.